It is 4 p.m. We're bringing developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories we're watching this Wednesday, August 13. The Budget Department has submitted to the House of Representatives a proposed 6.7 trillion peso budget for 2026. The education sector gets the lion's share in the NEP with 1 trillion pesos. DBM says this figure meets the recommended spending benchmark by a UN agency. After DepEd, the DPWH receives the second largest allocation with 881.3 billion pesos. In a message, President Marcos urges Congress to, quote, swiftly enact the budget, adding that the Philippines is on track with his administration's agenda for prosperity.
Budget Chief Amina Pangandaman confirmed that there's no funding for the Ayuda sa Kapos ang Kita or AKAP program in the 2026 proposed national budget. She cited limited fiscal space as the reason for excluding the program and also that there was carryover budget from last year. AKAP was first introduced in 2023 by House Speaker Martin Romualdez and Representative Zaldi Ko. A Chinese Shenyang J-15 fighter jet closely tailed a Philippine Coast Guard Cessna Caravan aircraft during an aerial patrol over Scarborough Shoal today. The jet reportedly performed multiple dangerous maneuvers, including flying alongside and under the PCG aircraft. PCG spokesperson Jay Tariela said the incident is the first time a military jet has intercepted their flight this year.
And the the Chinese People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command says the Chinese Navy drove away a U.S. destroyer near Scarborough Shoal. The PLA claims that the warship USS Higgins was conducting operations without Beijing's permission. But according to the Philippine Coast Guard, U.S. ships are conducting freedom of navigation operations in parts of the West Philippine Sea. Ba't itawa ka agad? Oh, that one, okay. Joining us today, political heckler, Raul Llamas. You missed that, don't you?
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Akala ko kasi pandit eh.
Hindi na. You have moved on.
Oh, we're back to heckler?
Yeah, we're back to heckler, of course.
Okay. And all the way from Parañaque, we've got Philippine Star Editor-in-Chief, Ami Pamintuan. Hi, Ami.
Hi, Ami.
Hi, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Parang kang Hawaii na Hawaii, ah. Red with flowers.
Madilim
Ba yan?
dito eh, hindi pa bumabagyo dyan.
Parang summer,
Malis na si Gorio, pero makulimlim pa rin.
May pagka-konting Lito Atienza, no?
Parang People's Liberation Army.
Uy, nasan si Lito Atienza?
Parang PLA eh, People's Liberation Army, oh.
PLA and Liberation Army Navy.
Actually, it looks more like a maple leaf.
Oo
Canada.
maple.
Parang Canadian na hilaw.
Canadian maple leaf symbol. Okay.
Ang dami.
Dami.
Tawa kayo ng tawa. Ito na,
ayun
6.793 trillion pesos is
Yes.
the budget for 2026 that the executive, meaning Malacanang, is proposing. Kaka-turnover lang sa Congress a few hours ago, and there are a few interesting changes this year. First and foremost, of course, the lower house is introducing a number of reforms in the budget process this year. Number one, chief of which is
Di umano.
Di umano. We have to see it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Di umano.
Okay, di umano.
Di umano.
Okay, wait, since they're flashing the graphics, let me read through them. Education, 9 to 8.5 billion pesos. Public Works is a little over 881 billion pesos, and then followed by health. Kasama na dito ang DOH and PhilHealth, i.e. Universal Healthcare. We've got defense at just under 300 billion pesos. Interior and local government is 287.5 billion. Agriculture and its attached agencies is 239.2 billion. Social welfare is 227 billion pesos flat. Transportation is 198.6 billion. The judiciary is getting 67.9 billion, and labor and employment 55.2 billion. So these are the top 10 departments.
Wala tayong comparison from previous year.
Wala pa, but during the press conference, Secretary Amina Pangandaman pointed out that tumaas yung education, of course, and bumaba yung DPWH. In terms of comparison from this year 2025 budget versus 2026 budget.
Ilang kaya dyan yung flood control sa DPWH?
Well-
Sabi nila kasi meron pang large chunk dyan
Oh.
na flood control.
So we have to monitor that. But remember, si Secretary Bonoan told us they're probably going to ask for a little over 250 ba yun? 250 billion.
71.7 billion.
Only?
2026 total flooding project nationwide, 71.7 billion.
Under DPWH.
235.1 billion for flood management, DPWH. For the MMDA, which handles flood control in Metro Manila, 2.6 billion.
So, flood management and flood control together is 300 billion, thereabouts. Ano ba yung flood management?
Ano? Dito.
Flood
Dito.
management program, DPWH, 235.1 billion.
So, okay. So, it seems like the chunk has now gone under flood management, hindi na flood control.
Which
was the
we don't
difference?
know what,
Kaya nga,
what
that's why
it
I'm
means.
asking, what does it mean?
Hindi ko alam eh.
Baka pareho lang yun. Baka ni-rename.
Oo, baka
Pero
rename
parang
lang. Tama si
interesting,
Abby.
ila-live stream daw ng ila-live stream ng House and sa Senate, ang minority pa lang ang nagpo-propose ng live streaming ng budget deliberation.
You mean at the
Tapos
BICAM?
nangako si Senator
Hindi,
Win
pati yung
Gatchalian.
The committee?
Pati yung committee level, yes.
Pangako, committee level pa lang yan. Pangako ni Win Gatchalian, wala na daw, hindi daw niya siya yung hindi daw niya papayagan yung insertion. Last minute budget insertion in the BICAM. Si Win Gatchalian ang head ng Finance Committee sa Senado.
Yeah.
Hindi daw niya papayagan.
Speaking of insertions, there's no budget for AKAP next year.
No,
Ito yung very controversial
Yes.
what do I
Insertion
call
sa
it? Budget. That was
Kasi wala talaga siya, sa 2025, wala siya sa National Expenditure
correct.
Program.
It was inserted
Talaga
by the
namang wala
House.
siya.
And the Senate.
Both chambers.
Both chambers yun.
Di ba
Both chambers.
dinelete ng
Well,
Senate? And then it was
Hindi,
restored in the
kasi
BICAM?
in-announce ni Grace po 21 billion for the
that's in the BICAM
House,
na.
yung AKAP,
That's in the
and
BICAM.
5 billion for the Senate.
That was in the
Umayag
BICAM.
na yung Senado.
Yeah, that was restored in
That
the
was in the
BICAM.
BICAM.
Yeah, that was the final BICAM.
Pero
Pero wala siya sa NEP.
BICAM na yan.
wala siya. The point is wala siya sa
Wala siya sa
original.
Comparatives, you want comparatives. Okay, in NEPTO, National Expenditure Program, for this year, Public Works proposal for next year pala. So, for next year's proposal, it's 881.3 billion, di ba?
Ngayon,
Yung NEP for this year, that was, gone through by the Congress last year, 900 billion.
So bumaba nga.
Bumaba.
That's what Secretary Amena was saying. Bumaba yung DPWH.
DOH is now NEP 320.5 billion. Last year, they were considering for this year 297.6
pero
billion.
usually
that
kasi,
seems
usually
regular.
bumababa talaga pag after elections.
Dahil naubos.
But
Parang yung AKAP, mahalaga yung pag-election eh.
sa
siya nagsabi nun. But
Ang hinahanap ko, meron na ba kaya yung allocation for unprogrammed
wala pa.
appropriations?
But
Wala.
just to clarify, sa AKAP, Secretary Amena was asked about it. Bakit walang AKAP for next year? And she said,
Walang election.
kasi may
May sobra pa daw ngayon.
correct, may carry over, may surplus budget pa from this year that I guess will be carried over, and also limited fiscal space, meaning wala ng pera. Right?
Right?
So,
May budget, may natirang pera, tapos hindi.
which they can carry over to 2026, I guess.
Meaning,
Savings yun.
dapat naglagay sila ng akap kung gano'n. May perang, float
I guess now it'll
Alam
go
niyo
to
kung
an
bakit siya
program.
I'm not
nagka-savings?
saying that you should have akap.
Alam niyo kung... Ako may suspecha ako kung bakit nagka-savings eh.
Sige.
Kasi nung eleksyon, di ba, nagkaroon ng controversy, hindi ni-release, hindi pinayagan ng budget na i-release yung mga pera
Oh, yeah.
for hinarangan nila.
I mean, si Congressman
Kaya-
Capitianco said as much. Sabi
Kaya
niya,
natalo yung alliance.
President Marcos held back 80-something billion pesos
Yes.
in insertions. As in, hindi ni-release. Specifically because...
Including mga 20 billion in flood control projects. dapat
Kaya actually,
inserted for
meron
this year.
din may final control over the purse ang executive eh. Kasi kahit kung ano-ano isaksak dyan ng mga congressmen,
pero may impound
senador,
naman eh.
pwedeng i-hold nila yung release. Until the last moment hanggang gumagapang na yung mga yan sa Malacanang, pakirelease naman yung aming anak.
Parang baha,
Ayan,
pwedeng
yan.
impound.
Impounded.
But good to see education is back at number one as constitutionally mandated,
As required, yes.
928.5 billion.
Wait for the BICAM kasi kaya nga di umano eh.
Tingin mo, there's
Parang
gonna be massive changes.
Last year, di ba?
Tingnan
Last
niyo yung
year.
tignan niyo yung detalye ng education, baka kasama na naman dyan yung mga schools ng na hindi naman dapat kasama under education.
Yeah.
PNPA, PNA,
PNA.
hindi dapat sa kanila yun, ha?
Yung
Ayan,
idinagdag nila
wala
last
pa kasi
time.
tayong detalye.
Tapos yung
Para tumaas.
NDCP.
Para tumaas yung DepEd, may mga sinama sila na usually hindi kasama.
Kasi typically they would be
Yan.
with the AFP or PNP or DND.
Yan. Titignan
We have to
natin
check
yung mga
mga
detalye niya, wala pa
classrooms.
tayo.
Oo.
Kasi like last year, yung NEP was medyo non-controversial until they started tinkering with that,
Yes.
with everything from the committee level up to the BICAM.
Well, that's why they're saying it was a mangled budget. Sino na mismo nagsabi niyan? That's the executive, right? The executive branch that said it. It was the mangled budget. The president was very unhappy about it.
And that cost the chairmanship of Zaldico, who is one of the bigger
Yes.
contractors.
Yes,
in
na
the
finally
list.
inamin na nila because at that time, remember Congressman Ko was saying,
It's health reasons daw.
yeah,
Pero lumabas din ngayon,
he was stepping down for health reasons.
lumabas din ngayon na parang may role yung Senate President sa BICAM. Di ba?
Ano yung role?
Yung insertions, yung 142, na parang lumalabas na siya pala yung umuupo sa BICAM. Hindi lang si Grace po.
Yan ang
Usually kasi may
hinihingi
rep
naman
eh.
ng ibang mga tao ngayon. Bakit hindi nyo i-release yung mga nag-introduce ng amendments
Yes, correct.
dito sa ongoing GAA, etong current GAA?
Yeah.
Bakit hindi nyo ni-release all this drama about all these reforms in the budgeting? Bakit hindi tayo maging transparent? Sino ba yung mga member in the first place? Sino yung member ng BICAM? Sige nga.
Okay, let's take a step back. Before pa mag-BICAM, meron ng small committee. So ito yung group that Congressman Tiangco has been pointing fingers at na may pakana ng insertions, right? The small committee members, we know who they are. That's the appropriations chair. That's the vice chair. That's the majority leader. That's the minority leader in the House for the 19th Congress. So alam na natin who they are, right? So it's just unclear at this
Pero may
point.
mga kanya-kanya din niya na mga member na eto naman pakisama naman to amendment.
Yun na nga.
May mga ganyan
Oo.
din eh.
Exactly. So who asked for what is the question here.
At saka ang sinasabi lang nila, ang BICAM kasi buy eh. Dalawa yan. No?
Takes two to tango.
Oo, takes two to tango.
Hindi ba?
Di ba? Ay, lumalabas lang yung isang buy nitong after several months. Pero limawa, nagreklamo yung iba. Bakit kami nasisisi doon sa zero budget ng PhilHealth? Yung isang buy ang nagkwanyan. Yung mga ganun ba na
Isang
kaya
bahay,
nga yung sinasabi mo na kailangan magkaroon ng accounting dun sa sino ba ang mga nagbawas, sino nagdagdag. No? Dahil lang ngayon kasi nakukuha natin puro mga bakbakan lang eh. No?
Na very vague, without any specifics.
Actually,
And
yung
the problem
DBM alam
is,
yon.
They
Yung
would
DBM
know.
dapat alam nila yon. No?
But they're not part of the committee the
Hindi,
small
alam,
committee.
sila yung crucial sa paggawa ng NEP eh.
Oh. Pero
Saka minomonitor nila lahat yan eh.
hindi ba
Hindi nila alam kung sino.
hindi nila, I don't think they would know. Hindi ba
Hindi nila alam kung
Hindi,
sino.
Sasubmit nila, and
katulad
then-
yung 142, sinabi ng DBM, totoo yan. Oh, ibig sabihin may mga alam sila eh. No? May mga alam sila.
I think what they mean, Bok, is hindi siya first-hand information. It's something that the DBM may have just learned from other sources. Eh. Hindi gaya ng ano.
But they weren't in the room, is
they
what we're
weren't
trying to say.
They were part of the
Nasabihan-
negotiations.
At the end of it, mabibigyan lang din sila ng report saying, here is what we've decided on for next year.
Ang sinasabi nga ngayon ay yung allegedly nasa room, hindi pala yun ang nasa room.
Talaga?
May mga iba palang tao na nasa room.
That
no?
we're not supposed to be there.
Yun ngayon yung lumalabas. Di ba, Ami?
Importante na i-live stream siya.
Yes.
Kung matutuloy ha.
Yes.
Kasi yung house mukhang itutuloy na nila. Ewan ko sa Senate dahil proposal pa lang ng minority. In the meantime, gusto daw ni President Marcos na i-push yung Freedom of Information Bill. Ewan ko kung matutuloy yan. Ang tagal-tagal na yan. Bata pa ako, pinupush na yan. Tingnan natin kung ano. Tingnan natin kung ano. Tingnan natin kung matuloy.
Bakit bata pa naman si Ami What are you saying?
Hindi, baka mamaya, elementary pa lang siya, pinupush na yun.
Baka unicameral pa lang nun.
Are you two boys really joking about a woman's age on air?
Siya nagsabi. Bata pa siya.
Ano may equal opportunity women kami.
Bata pa ako.
Equal opportunity,
Tanda na ako,
ano?
Miranda.
Hecklers.
Asarin mo lalaki, asarin mo babae. Okay lang yan, pare-pare yan. Di ba?
Oh, okay lang, okay lang. I learned all my wrinkles, okay lang ako dyan.
Anyways,
Coming from Ronald, para sa loob, no?
Gen Z siya, remember, sabi niya. Gen Z nyo.
Gen Z yung puso ko.
Gen Z.
Mga Gen Zombie na yun. O, teka.
Okay, anyways, coming back to, ano yung, freedom of information, yes, matagal na yun. But, I mean, okay,
The nature kasi
You have
ng
to give them-
insertions, wala naman niya resibo eh.
wala din minutes of the meeting.
Bulong yan eh.
Oo.
Diba? Mga bulong ang insertions eh.
What if you have what if you have full transparency, you have streaming video of from inside the room pero all the negotiations take place before the meeting.
At least pwede mong ma-question. Paano,
Diba?
Yes.
sa
Naka-record siya.
ang problema kasi sa kwan, sa pag nakatago, may mga quadruple, may mga triple, may double, di ba? At least dito makikita mo. Yung mga ine-expose ni Ping Lacson, ngayon, hindi na kanya kinakailangan i-expose. Makikita mo na first hand.
Oo. I-expose pa rin daw niya next week in a privileged speech. He
Yes.
tweeted about it. The other interesting thing today was si Congressman Sandro Marcos, who of course is House Majority Leader, was ambushed on the sidelines of the press con this morning. And sabi niya, he agrees that the House cannot be the one to investigate the anomalies in the flood control projects because how can a body be the one to investigate itself?
At hindi rin pwede ang DPWH.
Hindi
Hindi
rin.
naman daw DPWH.
Well, yeah.
It's DepDev.
Yeah,
Yeah.
napunta na sa DepDev yung responsibility.
Pero nung original nung SONA kasi,
Yung
ang,
dati niya
ang pinapa-imbestigahan ng presidente, yung DPWH eh.
Correct.
Buti ngayon, binago na niya.
Oo. He was also asked, Congressman Marcos was also asked if he had any comments on Congressman Zaldi Co, as we were just saying, because apart from the fact na he had a role in the appropriations, I mean, he was appropriations chair last year, yung company that's linked to him, SunWest Construction, is now back in the headlines because nga, number
number
8 sa top 15 contractors of flood control projects.
Kaya nagreklamo si Senate President Chis Escudero. Bakit ang focus nyo doon sa 1%?
Hindi yung 99%.
Hindi
pero,
yung
pero yung 1%, 5 billion yun.
Plus.
10.6 billion yan, ha?
Oo, plus.
Hindi siya 1 hindi siya 1M.
amount,
But
ano?
anyway, is that the point? The point as well. The point as well is, okay,
Sa kanya galing yun, ha? Bakit yung 1% ang ina-investigahan nyo? yung kasi yung
hindi naman yung
kaibigan niya
percentage yung pinag-aawayan
Yun yung
dito
nagbigay sa kanya ng 30 million, yung 1% na
Yes.
yun.
And he admits that they are friends.
We were talking about this yesterday. Under the Omnibus Election Code,
Bawal yun.
bawal yan sa
Bawal.
Section 95.
Tama.
Yun lang, may lusot doon, may loophole. Kasi iba yung kumpanya, ibang
May
entity
tao.
naman yung tao. Pero parehong conflict of interest eh.
Lahat naman may lusot sa Pilipinas.
Pero parehong
Cheated naman.
however you look at it eh. It's still conflict of interest.
Tingnan natin kung may makukulong sa lahat ng
May
expose.
paalala rin ngayon si Romulo Macalintal. He's an election lawyer, alam naman natin. Sabi niya, yung pwedeng contribution kahit personal, kailangan daw 5% lang of the taxable income ng donor.
5%
I wonder
taxable
if-
income ng donor.
I-
Okay.
5%.
I doubt-
So 30 million yung napunta kay Cheese.
From
I-compute
Lawrence,
nga yun kung magkano yun.
5% divided by 20.
5% ng total income ng donor.
Pinagbigay. Yun ang bigay.
Oo.
Bigay.
Yung
30
personal,
times
kasi
20,
sinabi niyo
no?
personal eh.
I don't
Hindi
think
daw
COMELEC goes
pwedeng
so far
mag-exceed.
as to audit that. I mean,
Tsaka mang problema mo rin kasi doon is your tax returns are confidential eh. So there's no way of checking unless there's a case in court. 30
Kung
million
iimbestigahan nga
times
yan
20.
for, yan na nga, for
So,
graph,
600.
pwede mong kunin yung
600
income tax
million.
return.
600.
Ang bilis ng mat, no?
600 million?
It's just round numbers.
Personal?
600.
Tama nga naman.
But again, that's, I don't know if that's going to be very hard to audit. 5% lang nga ba? I mean, who checks these? It may be in the law, pero
Maximum.
dapat, I don't know that COMELEC does the audit.
Umami naman si Chairman Garcia na nahihirapan sila sa ganyan. Kaya humihingi sila ng tulong sa mga tao.
Yung overspending na nga lang
Committed
sa,
kayo, you
sa
provide the
kampanya.
information.
Saka kanya na, hindi lang yung binigay niya kay Cheese, yung binigay pa niya sa iba. Paano? Baka nagbigay siya dito 30, dito nagbigay siya ng 20, dito. So, lalagpas yun, no?
So ngayon, kung personal income yan, saan ang galing yung personal income kung separate ka from your company? Diba? Paano yun, Edin? Ako medyo mahina ako dyan eh. Saan mo i-base yung income mo kung ganon? Kung separate yung donation from the company,
Oh, mali mo.
alak na 600 million.
Harap yung ginto niya, Masita.
I mean, family wealth is one of the standard answers, di ba? I mean, my parents were successful, tapos minana
May income eh.
namin.
Taxable income eh.
Hindi, pero pag
Taxable
naman mo na
income.
you're only taxed once for the for the estate tax eh. And after that, hindi mo na kailangang bayaran.
So, ibig sabihin, liable dyan si ex-human rights lawyer Harry Roque. Then, nagbigay siya ng 37 million na contribution sa campaign ni Vice President Sara noong 2022.
Teka, nalimutan niyo ba si
37 million yun, ha?
Si Alan Peter Cayetano, mas malaki pa dinonate niyang campaign funds kaysa sa salin niya.
Sabagay, no?
Tanda mo yun.
Oo, yung...
I remember that eh.
Hindi niya kailangan sa video, Katigong? Hindi ba niya?
Hindi ko nga ta eh.
Digong,
Teka, let me look at. I remember that eh. Mas malaki yung contribution niya to a campaign, I think to Duterte, kaysa sa yung declaration sa Salin.
So, sino magsasampa ng kaso? Tayo?
Hindi ko alam.
Dapat kasi ombudsman, kaso mabuti na lang napalitan na, no? Mapapalitan na.
Oo. Kasi naalala ko, nagbigay si
Tinago ng
Hardy ng
ombudsman.
37 million.
Imbis na inimbestigahan, itinago yung mga sali ng ombudsman eh.
So,
Binatext
ibig
mo na.
sabihin, ang taxable income ni Harry ay more than 700 million na malayo sa kanyang salin.
Oh.
No? Ganun lalabas eh.
5%,
Dahil nagbigay siya kay
5%.
Sarah ng 37 million eh.
Ito yung
37 ba?
Oo.
Ito po, si Alan Peter Cayetano contributed 71 million in tandem ads to the 2016 campaign of Duterte, 3 times higher than his 23.6 million declared net worth in 2015. Wala lang.
Yeah.
But in any case,
Baka ako,
with the
So yung
Connect-
taxable income ni Senator Alan Peter ay bilyon. Lalabas. Bilyon
Do
yung
you
kanyang
doubt it?
taxable income. Ha?
do you doubt it?
Hindi, dahil yung salin kasi niya, 30% lang no kanyang...
But you know, with
hindi,
yung
you compare yung salen kasi yan ang problema kaya hindi na nakukuha salen eh. You have to compare it with the tax return, di ba? Yung binayad
Yes.
na buwis eh. Kung yan iimbestigahan, kayang-kaya naman yan ng isang seryosong investigador eh. Hindi compare mo yung salen saka yung income tax return.
Laki naman ng qualifier mo, isang seryosong
Actually, itatriangulate mo yan eh. Tatriangulate mo yung tao at saka yung kanyang pamilya. Halimbawa sa LRA, properties, land, etc. Sa LTO, mga sasakyan. Sa Bureau of Immigration, trips abroad. No? So, pwede mo yan eh. Kung iimbestigahan talaga ng seryoso, matatriangulate
talagang
mo
iimbestigahan
yung
niya.
tunay na kayamanan niya. At hindi lang sa kanya,
problema,
yung immediate
yung ombudsman,
family. Oo.
Hindi lang tinago yung salen, tinigil pa niya yung lifestyle check. Wala daw kahihinatnan yung lifestyle check.
at nagbanta
And
pa
we
siya sa
don't have a
media.
racketeering law dahil kahit anong proposal na racketeering law sa Kongreso, wala, parang yung anti-dynasty law yan eh.
Yun yung norm eh.
Dead on arrival. DOA yan, DOA.
you know what? Forget about the ombudsman. I mean, Senator Cheese is a bar top-notcher, isn't he? So,
Hindi.
presumably, hindi siya.
Hindi
But
siya
in any case, galing siya sa UP Law. He's very highly trained. And shouldn't he know all of this? That there is an omnibus election code prohibiting donations from...
Bakit ang dami mong premise na palibas na kita kay Jubilo eh?
I'm just laying out the
Wala akong
premise.
sinabi. Wala akong sinabi.
Kami ni Ami.
Wala akong sinabi,
We disagree with the premises.
Mali yung premise na pag basta UP, you're ano.
Not
UP.
automatically. Tanong mo kay Ami.
Sabi nga dati ni Kwan,
Yeah, but it's UP law.
sabi nga ni Heidi
That's
Yorak
about the
dati.
highest,
Sabi ni Heidi Yorak dati, lahat ng problema ng bansa nagsimula sa UP law.
Nagsimula sa UP.
Sa UP law nagsimula.
Marami naman ako kakilalang, excellent lawyers with high integrity that came from UP law.
Pero mas
mga
marami
ex-convict.
pero mas marami kang hindi kakilala.
But anyways, the question remains,
We're
dapat
not
alam
saying
niya yan.
anything, we're just saying
Dapat alam niya yan in terms of ethics, in terms of
Nag-react nga siya
propriety, in terms of legality na can I accept donations from a
Nag-react nga siya
government
sa
contractor?
isang malaking non-sequitur. Bakit
Yeah.
yung 1% ang inimbestigahan nyo? Napakalaking non-sequitur.
Pero may lusot nga yun eh. Legally may lusot
hindi,
yun eh.
yung lusot is, yes, I get it. May lusot legally, and then yung lusot din niya is, wala pa siya sa Congress when,
Nung deliberate yung budget.
Correct.
For
That's
the-
But
even worse kasi
nevertheless-
governor siya before he entered
yes,
Congress.
but nevertheless, this guy has been a
even
contractor
worse.
for a long time, is what he also said, right?
from
So
Sorsogon.
he should know
From Sorsogon.
from source to God, magkababata nga sila, like he said. So, again, my very basic question is, di ba dapat the onus is on him? Because he's a lawyer, and he should know that walang contributions.
But as a lawyer, he also knows that there's no legal liability.
Alam din naman nila na maraming ghost project May mga tumestigo ng mga barangay captains, mga flood control sa lugar nila na non-existing. So, alam din ng contractor yun, alam din ng politiko yun, and yet it happens.
So sad.
Ngayon lang nagkakalabas. Ewan natin kung sinong mapaparusahan.
Parang,
May mga
parang,
nagkakalat pa nga yan.
parang Ami,
mga
yung, di ba kaya na-highlight yung pork barrel dahil doon sa Napoles. Kung hindi sumulpot si Napoles, hindi naman ma-highlight yun Hindi naman siya matatanggal Madedeclare na illegal, di ba?
sige, after Napoles, ano nangyari? Nagkaroon tayo ng unprogrammed appropriations.
Oo. At
Hindi
ngayon,
ba?
tsaka-
Supreme
Ngayon, yung
Court,
pork
ano
barrel,
yan,
hindi na, ang pork barrel hindi na 70 million versus 200 million. Ngayon, unli na siya, basta malapit ka sa kusina.
Anli. Nadagdag pa yung paggamit ng ayuda na pork barrel style.
So ngayon, basta nasa kusina ka, okay ka na.
Kaya nga. Lalong lumala
si Pulong nga, may
Titingnan
51
natin
billion sa distrito niya.
I don't know anything about that. But anyways, okay, here are a few other numbers. 19 trillion is the debt burden in the Philippines by the end of 2026. Projection lang yan ha. Most of the time, we overshoot the projection. So that's almost 2 trillion higher than this
In
year.
20
Debt burden lang yan,
zero
which
yun.
means yung bayad utang.
In 2016, it was 5.8
Trillion.
And that's for 30 years.
Wow. Mababa. Pre-COVID pandemic, mababa din yung debt to GDP ratio. It was only about 30-something %, which means mataas yung capability to repay those debt. Now we're over 60% debt to GDP ratio. And this figure is very overwhelming, no? In a way, 19 trillion pesos.
Pero ang sinasabi
Forecast.
ng Secretary
Malaki pa yan
Recto,
kasi
nung
ang
guest
dami
natin
nating
siya
Ang
nung
daming
guest
subsidized programs
Correct, yeah.
Pero nung guest natin dito si
palaki ng
Secretary
palaki yung
Recto,
subsidies.
ang sinasabi niya, kahit ganyan yung debt to GDP ratio, so long na nababayaran natin, ay hindi siya problema.
Which is true, but you have to check the revenue side of the equation if it's growing as fast as the expenditure side.
Hindi nga.
Yun na
Deficit nga
nga. Yun na nga. Kaya nga lumulobo yung debt to GDP
Yeah.
ratio. That's the problem. Okay, we have to take a very quick wrap right now. You're watching Storycon 1 News. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We've got developing news in the stories behind the headlines. Welcome back to Storycon, the Store Conference. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Regina Lay, still with us. I'm Ipamidun of the Philippine Star and political heckler Ronald Llamas. Let's bring in our guest for the day. We've got Tingog Party List Representative, Congressman Jude Asidre. Good afternoon, Congressman.
That's me, sir.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon
Congressman.
sa inyo lahat.
Long time no see.
Yeah nga po, it's pleasure to be back, sir.
Sir, first and foremost, I want to clarify something. Are you still House Assistant Majority Leader?
Oh, I'm no longer part of the Rules Committee I have been recently appointed as chairperson of the Committee on Higher Education and Higher and Technical Education.
What happened there? Did you resign, or did you ask for to be moved, or what?
Well, the opportunity to be committee chair was there, and normally you cannot be. The role of deputy majority leader is equal almost to a chairmanship. So usually you have one of the positions.
So your preference is the committee?
Yes, I prefer to stay with the Committee on Higher Education.
Or
Right.
kung nakapasok ka sa Commission on Appointments, usually hindi ka na Deputy Speaker.
Okay.
Ganun ba?
Sir, makikichismis muna kami. Ano po? Diretso ko na. Sir, well, I understand that you came from a meeting. Could you give us an update on what we can expect from the House, especially with the submission of the NEP to the lower chamber?
Well, yes, today we were able to receive na officially the ceremonial turnover. I was there this morning when we received the National Expenditure Program, and based on the initial presentation of Secretary Pangandaman, syempre mas happy yata ako for the first time. The funding for education, both basic and higher education, has actually reached 4% of the GDP as recommended, no? So magandang pangitain that priority is being given to education as well as to the social services. And in this afternoon naman, we had the turnover of the NEP dun naman sa civil society observers. And this is one of the 3 or 4 budget reforms that the Speaker and the Committee on Appropriations have actually introduced for this budget season.
So you
Sino
had...
po yung civil society observers? Sino po yun? Civil society
They come
observer?
from different NGOs and CSOs. Some would have a more technical understanding of the budget, like Social Watch is there. Tapos may iba naman that come from a more sectoral perspective. Kasi the role naman of the observers is not just to make sure that there is technical compliance with the budget making process. Pero nandiyan naman ang kagustuhan din natin magkaroon ng saktong sectoral or sectoral context to the budget items that are being proposed. So we have sectors represented like even for children, for women. Then we have like PLCPD is there, Child Rights Network is there. And many of these NGOs and people's organizations have actually been working with Congress on many other legislative efforts.
Kung open pa
Po
naman
yung
yung...
ibang reforms? Sabi nyo, 3 or 4 ba yung reforms?
The other
Ano pa yung
reform
iba?
is the abolition of the small committee. So wala na yung small committee. And then, of course, the open BICAM process. Yun po yung mga reforms na na-introduce po for this budget season.
So kung open pa yung membership ng mga civil society, pwede pa silang mag-apply at sumama?
Well, for now, no, kasi ang appreciation talaga nun was to make sure na mula sa simula talaga that starts today, nandyan na po talaga ang participation niya. That's why nga na inabot sa kanina at least ceremonially, but since the NEP naman is available online, nagsimula na yung participation nila until the very end of the process. So ang siguro mangyayari na lang dyan, sir, no, kung meron pang iba, many of the NGOs involved are actually federations of NGOs, like Code NGO is there. So we can work along the same ecosystem. Siguro yung mga partner NGOs nila that connected. Because understandably po, this is only the first time that we're, at least on an institutional level, Congress is doing it. The House, at the very least, is doing it. So, syempre, there are some adjustments, some improvements that we have to do just to ensure that this becomes a really enriching and a very active participation, allow for active participation on the part of the observers.
Why? Gusto mo mag-apply? Mag-apply ka ba dapat?
Pinag-iisipan ko.
But these civil society organizations, can they ask questions? Or they're just there to observe?
Mas
Their
symbolic pa yan.
participation would be limited by the rules of Congress, no? So what we're doing is for every given week that they do, kasi there's a schedule naman, no, that will be relayed to them. For every week, we will assign, because this is being done in partnership with the CPPRD, the budget research group of Congress, no? So there will be a huddle, kumbaga, there will be a small group session every week wherein we will look for legislative champions who can serve as who can articulate the concerns of these NGOs in the committee level at the very least, or at least in the plenary as well. So yun yung concession. And also they'll be given one day wherein the budget will be presented to them and they'll be able to raise questions, but that will not be part of the budget briefing process.
At what point would that come, sir? Yung one-day budget presentation? That would be...
We're expecting it to, we have yet to hear from the Appropriations Committee as for the exact date, but we're expecting it should be at the early stages of the budget process.
Meron din ba kayong iniisip na internal reforms related to flood control? Kasi sabi ng DPWH ngayon, medyo they admitted na medyo nahihirapan sila to link. Alam naman natin na nililink nga yung mga congressmen to certain questionable flood control projects. May naiisip din ba kayo na reforms along that line?
Well, to be fair naman kasi to Congress, what we do is we appropriate, we make our suggestions. But in the end, the whole entire procurement process is being handled naman by the implementing agency. I think, for just to put things in the right perspective, no, not saying na we're absolving everyone of a bit, but I think the proper response really is to strengthen the institutions that are responsible for the implementation of these projects. And part of strengthening these institutions is imputing accountability. Diba? This implementation of projects are within the purview of the executive. And therefore, whether it's a congressman, if there's any, no? And ang mahirap kasi, Miss Amy, kasi if we allow this to continue in the same narrative, in the end, there becomes a tendency to have hasty generalization eh. Una, flood control program, masama na kaagad, di ba? Well, in fact, much of the flooding, even in Metro Manila, has been solved because of all this infrastructure that has been being implemented, di ba? Siguro ang tanong is, gano'ng ka-epektibo ang design natin? And part of that also is making sure that the right projects are being done at the right places and that the procurement rules are being followed.
I don't think that's the right premise, Kong, that most of the flooding in Metro Manila has been solved. We saw that just a couple of weeks ago when we had those two back-to-back.
I live in Marikina, no? I live in Marikina.
Yeah, but that's just Marikina.
Yeah. I live in Marikina, and then the flooding really, for the last couple of weeks, no? Kung nangyari to dati, the flooding would have been already pronounced. And then, but significantly, kita talaga namin na mabilis bupa yung baha. But that's beside the point, no? Kasi there are other considerations like design, siguro yung volume of water involved. I'm not saying that nothing can be done, no? But maybe, just maybe, no? Maybe we need to look at the totality of the efforts being done to address the flooding in Metro Manila, not just flood control. Or even with the flood control, sabihin na natin, baka kailangan tignan natin yung design. Baka tignan natin kung saan ginagawa.
Baka gano'n nga talaga, Kong, no? Yung design. Because in more modern developed countries, they don't have thousands of flood control projects. They only have one or two. So very holistic, very integrated, lalo na sa mga big cities. Drainage, water impounding, waste management.
Water catchment, basin.
So baka yun yung mahalaga na in the future, baka mas kaunti ang flood control pero mas integrated at mas
But I
holistic.
think in that case, Secretary, no, more than individual projects, a master plan is really needed, di ba? And we have to consider two things also. The geography, kung saan to yung binabaha, so considering possible improvements have been done. I'm not an expert over these things, but I would rather want to look at it from a more comprehensive perspective, like probably a centralized flooding master plan, flood control master plan. Kasi, like for example, even the frequency and the volume of rainfall in Metro Manila and in parts of the country actually are hindi naman to this is more than the usual we had in past years. So this should also be part of studying whether adjustments be made, whether in the planning or in the implementation.
Let me
Okay lang ba sa congressman na sa DPWH na lang yung flood control? Kasi yan yung pinag-uusapan ngayon, kasi chap-chap nga, sabi nga ni Ronald. Bakit hindi na lang mag-master plan under a national agency?
Well, I agree.
Okay
with
lang ba yun
you.
sa congressman?
To be honest, that's why I was pushing for the Department of Water Resources. Kasi that would have really, kumbaga, provided a more institutional response to the management of our water resources. Remember, a good reason, part of the reasons why we have flooding is also because of water coming down from the upper parts of Central Luzon, di ba? Or parts of Central Luzon that have now been affected by the development in other parts of the region. So from another perspective, this flooding can be better managed and even channeled to better use, especially in areas where irrigation or where water is actually di ba?
Potable water.
let me be more specific, Congressman Isidre. I'm sure you saw you were tuning in when President Marcos was giving his presentation on the flood control projects. There was one slide there where he juxtaposed the top 10 provinces that are most flood bless you. Top 10 provinces that are most flood prone against the ones that got the most number of flood control projects. You're a native of Tacloban. Leyte was number 7 on the list of the provinces with the most projects. It got 262 from 2022 to 2025. What happened there?
Well, honestly, I'm not at all surprised because 10 years ago we used to be very flooded. If you remember, there were two occasions that there was a flooding in Palo and nearby municipalities, even parts of Tacloban. Much of that has already been addressed, especially with all these flood control programs that are being implemented, where everyone is free naman to see what's happening in Tacloban. With all this, we are now making a major waterway wherein we bring in the water from the low-lying parts inland down to sea. These projects are all there, and everybody is free to look into it and see the situation. And of course, alam mo, since nag-Yolanda, nag-iba na rin ang mindset namin We don't wait to floods to come. We've been very active making sure that the right infrastructure is there. So I really do not know that because it's unfair naman to simply limit the observation by comparing and contrasting the two lists that was presented with the president. Although, of course, we're very happy that the president gives us that perspective. But for me, somebody who comes from Tacloban, I saw the improvements in our flooding situations over the last couple of years. Second, I've also seen how we've shifted our mindset from merely responding to actually anticipating. That's why we've been putting all this infrastructure, because we had the worst of it 10 years ago with Typhoon Yolanda. So whatever intervention government can, and being their elected representatives, we've been really pushing for more and more disaster-resilient infrastructure in the region.
On a different note, Congressman, a more controversial note. Sabi ni Senate President Chis Escudero nung isang araw na may demolition job daw sa kanya. At yung demolition job ay nanggagaling daw sa lower house, sa Kongreso. Meron ba kayo nababalitaan na demolition job diyan?
So, due respect, Secretary, the Senate President, for the sake of the institution, should start naming names. Diba? Okay, two things that I've been hearing from the Senate, with all due respect to the other chamber. If it's not ad hominem, it's shifting blame. Diba? It's about time if they really have a case, they should just name things. You haven't heard members of the House provide ad hominem comments, not even when arguments where we had passionate arguments in the middle of all these issues. We've always maintained respect, if not for those we disagree with, but for at least the institution they represent. And I hope that the Senate will provide the same level of respect and courtesy to a co-equal branch of government.
Gusto daw siyang tanggalan para matuloy yung impeachment trial ni Vice President Duterte. Meron bang ganong role ang House? Kaya ba yun ng House? To engineer that kind of leadership change in the Senate?
To change President of the Senate, only senators can participate. Diba? Ay, hindi naman, well, ang galing kasing gumawa ng kwento sa Senado. Parang, I think, Miss Abby, wag na lang nating patulan.
Professor, we haven't seen this level of rock bottom relations between the two chambers in recent memory. I mean, I don't even recall ever having heard this kind of back and forth.
Antagonism.
Oh, parang
It's-
everything went out the window.
I have to also point out, it's not just the Senate hitting the House. It's bumanat din naman yung House. For instance, when Senator Amy Marcos said, maybe you need to change your speaker, you know, a few congressmen came out in defense of Speaker Martin Romualdez. So meron din naman that are speaking up on your side. So it's both
Antagonism
ways.
did not begin with us. Diba? Antagonism didn't begin with the House. We've always put ourselves above personalities and really focus on the issues. Well, in the case of Senator Marcos, the call was to respect the decision of the House in terms of our leadership, because we don't meddle naman with the concerns of the leadership of the Senate. I don't think that's a
Congressman, anong mood ngayon dyan sa House, considering all these accusations about anomalies involving the flood control projects, saka yung sa budget? Ano po yung mood din nyo kapag nag-uusap-usap kayo ngayon?
Well, of course, everybody is just focused on doing what needs to be done for the country. I think the enthusiasm and the willingness of the members of the House to really work and deliver has not been hampered. Andyan pa naman, we have a solid leadership in the House. We're almost completing the organization of the House, and many of our members have been starting to work on their priority legislation. I think it's business as usual in the House. All this noise, as in the past months, we've always maintained to be above all this and really focus on just getting the work done.
Sir, pahabol lang ako, sir. Alam ko malayo pa yung February 6, yung sinasabi ng Korte Suprema na the second chance to file an impeachment complaint or initiate an impeachment complaint against VP Sara. But that's 6 months away, and that brings everything so much nearer to 2028. I know we don't want to color it in terms of politics, but that's how reality is. My question is there any concern on the part of members of Congress that you won't have the same amount of support for an impeachment of VP Sara by come February 2026 because of, number one, the political landscape is changing. Number two, 2028 is so much nearer. And number three,
It's the same Senate.
It's the same Senate that's going to be the same Senate that archived everything is going to be the one deliberating on in the trial.
Well, ayaw ko naman pangunahan yung mga kasamahan ko, no? But personally, if you just have to ask me, no, I think accountability is not an afterthought in governance, diba? Until the questions are answered, I think whatever means there may be to impute accountability on public officials should be pursued. As for the action of the House, of course, the leadership will be the one to determine that, and that would be discussed, I'm sure, among the members.
Okay. On that note, we're going to leave the conversation. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for talking to us today, Congressman Jude Asidre of Tingog Party List.
Maraming
Salamat
salamat.
Kong.
Thank you, Congressman.
That is all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining Storycon. Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star, and Ronald Llamas, a resident political pundit. Join us again tomorrow, 4 p.m. for Storycon. I'm Regina Lay. Pwede rin
So let me
heckler.
correct that. Heckler. Nagulat siya eh. I'm Ed
Nagulat siya.
Linga. We have one news all sides all the time.